What is up, everybody? It is December 26th, the day after Christmas. Devin, how was your Christmas, my friend?
As good as it can be. Everything is merry and bright, my friend. How was yours?
It was all right. On the fantasy side, it wasn't too great, but overall, enjoying time with family. Some gifts. Gifts are always nice. Love that. But spending time with loved ones, of course, is invaluable. And of course, me and Devin have to do this banter on stream because we actually don't talk to each other outside the podcast. We actually hate each other. If you
Yes.
if you didn't know, it's actually we dared each other to start a podcast, and the first one to give up loses. So it's kind of like a game of chicken that no one is willing to give in on. So you're kind of just stuck with us. So,
Man, AJ Dillon, where were you all year?
dude,
My
I was so high on AJ Dillon. I really thought he took the job for a second of like carries, maybe not like reception work, but even then he was okay at it. But I thought Aaron Jones would be like the third down back or the 2 minute back for the most part. But boy, AJ Dillon fell off a cliff, didn't he?
he's finished with like over 10 points the last 3 weeks. 4 weeks actually. And I had Swift and Ramondre in my starting lineup this week. So that's about how good that lineup went. Luckily, it wasn't for a championship. I was just playing in the consolation round in this league, but by God, you hate to see it.
A lot of studs fell flat this weekend. Diggs, Adams, Andrews, Stevenson, Aaron Jones. There's so many people out there with stud teams who are going to be watching other people play the finals. It's tough.
If Everett can find the end zone, I'll salvage the week with Stevenson and other boy Swift. So we'll see how it pans out. But yeah, it didn't look too good.
And your Chargers are up 10-3 going into the half, and if you win, you're in. It's as simple
Yep,
as that. Beat the
that's about
Colts.
it's about all I have to worry about in terms of football moving forward. Because at this point, if I win a fantasy championship, great. If I don't, even better. None of it matters. It's all just happenstance.
It's true. So let's just start with what the hell is going on in the NFL. We'll start with our good friend Zach Wilson. 9 for 18, 92 yards and a pick, and replaced by who? Chris Streveler. He was that bad against arguably one of the worst defenses in the league. Jacksonville is not known. They've been shooting out with a lot of teams, but Zach Wilson in the rain couldn't do a damn thing. To be fair, Zach Wilson in the sunshine couldn't do a damn thing outside of your best friend's mom. So I was on Tyler's show earlier and came to the conclusion that we think Zach Wilson is labeled a bust, and that's about it for him at this point. What do you think?
I think the Zach Wilson thing has been about as done as it can be, for lack of better terms. Like it's just tough. Zach Wilson effectively is the worst Jets draft pick of the last 10 years. And I know they drafted Sam Darnold back in 2018, but at least Darnold was the starter for like 3 or 4 seasons. I don't think Zach Wilson has been a starter for even half of a season throughout his career, whether it's injuries or just subpar quarterback play.
Well, and Sam Darnold didn't have an all-pro running back, an outstanding rookie wide receiver, and an insanely strong defense. Like, Darnold had to fight for his life out there. Wilson never even really had to do a whole lot, but he even couldn't do that. He couldn't hit a guy 5 yards down and make throws that it feels like we could have made standing in the pocket. It's just everything Zach Wilson could have done wrong, he did do wrong, has done wrong. And Robert Saleh continues to be like, well, this isn't the last we've seen of Zach Wilson. Like, you might be right, Robert, but it's the last we've seen of him in a Jets jersey because now he's back to being inactive in game days behind Mike White and Joe Flacco. This team is ready to win now. They are a good team. They're in a tough division. They're in a tough conference, for crying out loud. And Zach Wilson arguably should have this team at 9 or 10 wins the way the talent has been around him, but he can't even do that. Now they're 7-8.
Yeah, if I'm correct, let me look up NFL's DVOA statistics or the rankings of DVOA on the season. Football Outsiders, give me the money.
Show me Zach Wilson.
I can't. I have to subscribe. That sucks.
You hate to
You
see it.
overall.
It's just, I don't know, man.
It's
Literally any other quarterback they took would have been fine.
the New York Jets roster wise are probably a top 10 unit in football today. That's how good they have been at assembling talent outside of the quarterback position. This team did lose Elijah Vera Tucker earlier in the season, along with Brees Hall, and that to me signified the end of the Jets' playoff hopes in this season. And thanks to a guy named Mike White, it's been extended for a little bit. The shocking news came that Zach Wilson's not even the backup quarterback anymore. They came out today and said he's going to be listed as inactive on game days as the QB3 behind Joe Flacco. I don't know where he goes from here, but it's obviously on a train, plane, or automobile out of the state of New York because he is bad. And it's not going to get better for him as a New York Jet. To be fair, it was never going to be good for him as a New York Jet. I don't know about you, Austin, but I've never considered BYU to be a football powerhouse of any sorts. Granted, Steve Young, Hall of Famer, went to BYU. Zach Wilson is not Steve Young. And in a COVID year where the schedules were extremely weak comparatively to normal college football slates, and a pro day where he threw like one off balance throw, it's just you can watch a lot of tape and you can go to pro days, but you got to have field of reference. Because in a draft where Justin Fields realistically should have been the QB2 off the board, the Jets were decided upon a guy that had all the pomp and circumstance coming out of BYU, but none of the actual game film to back it up. So it's a tough situation. The Jets have set themselves back at least 3 years with this because it's not like they can cut him. They could totally cut him next season and just be gone with it. It's a rookie scale contract. But they've wasted formative years of this team's identity offensively trying to make Zach Wilson work.
I mean, it's got to be a guy like, I don't know. A lot of people are saying Gardner Minshew after what we saw on Saturday. Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know how I feel about Gardner Minshew based off the one game he played against Dallas. And I mean, and he was a Jet, right? Gardner Minshew started as a Jet,
He
or
was a
was he a
Jag.
Jaguar? A Jag, okay. But he was he a Jet at one point? Am I
No,
crazy?
he never a Jet, drafted by the Jaguars. They sucked. And then he wasn't terrible, but he was traded to the Eagles last season because obviously they got their franchise guy in Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. Okay,
I
so
think
I am just crazy.
the best options for the New York Jets are Jimmy Garoppolo and Derek Carr, 1A, 1B, or they draft a guy in the first round. They have acquired plenty of talent over the last couple of years to where they could reach for a quarterback if they believe it's going to be their guy. They're not going to have a top 10 pick, but I don't think there's really 3 top 10 level quarterbacks in this draft, depending on how you feel about Will Levis. So NFL mock draft 2023.
So riddle me this: with Houston beating Tennessee, and good Lord, we'll get to that. If Houston wins another game and Chicago does not, Chicago gets the number 1 pick. Now, Chicago should trade out of the number 1 pick.
Speaking of trading out, this the draftnetwork.com has the Bengals trading into the 2nd pick to take Will Anderson. Guess who's getting packaged in this mock trade? You're going to shit yourself.
Please enlighten me.
So they get the 2nd overall pick. They move T. Higgins, a 2023 first, which is 28th overall, a 2023 second, and a 2024 third. If the Bears were to get T. Higgins while moving the 2nd pick, it's a win. It's a win. This also has the Texans taking C.J. Stroud, which I don't believe will happen because then Bryce Young falls. I think the Seahawks take a quarterback. I think Seahawks take a quarterback. They should, is what they should do. They're ahead of schedule everywhere else.
But what's their position right now?
8? They're third. They're third from the Broncos.
Oh, that's right. They have Denver. I keep forgetting they have Denver, and Denver's been awful.
Vegas Raiders taking Bijan Robinson. Oh, it's
That would be
gonna
something.
get interesting. This is a draft that I think is going to age extremely well. There are a lot of good to talented players.
But at the same time, the Raiders at 4, right? Wait, what where are the Raiders at taking Bijan?
They are the ninth pick currently.
Okay, because I think I've seen a lot of people send Bijan to Philadelphia, and I think is Philadelphia currently ahead of them?
They're number 10 via New Orleans.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I don't, but the Raiders need
Anyone
so
that
much more.
anyone that has a running back that is going to be franchise tagged after this season will be in on Bijan Robinson if he's available at their pick.
But so let's rewind.
Yes.
If the Bears have number 1, the Jets should be one of those teams that call, right?
Even if the Bears have number 2, the Jets should call. If the Jets could make a package to get a guy like CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, you do it in a heartbeat. If it costs you next year's first, you deal with it. Because looking at the Jets roster, so let's look at the youngest teams in the NFL, just for humor's sake. So Giants among youngest teams in NFL, blah, 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 blah. That's not what I wanted. PhillyVoice.com. Okay, so previously the youngest teams in the NFL were as follows. So, okay, 2022, the New York Jets have a median age of 26.1. Makes them 24th in the league. So maybe they don't. And the thing is, the youngest team is the Browns at 25 years of age on average. A lot of the Jets' impact pieces are incredibly young. Sauce Gardner, Michael Carter, the both of them. You've got Quinnen Williams. You've got the offensive lineman and Elijah Vera Tucker. Brees Hall is a second-year running back coming into
Jermaine
next year.
Johnson.
Jermaine Johnson. This is a team that is built extraordinarily well through the draft after moving a guy like Jamal Adams. I just think if they have a shot to get their quarterback, I would much rather them dive in fully to go get a guy like CJ Stroud or Bryce Young if he falls. Because with how talented their roster is, I don't expect them to be picking in the top 5 anytime soon. Obviously, their division is a fucking hellscape because of Miami, Buffalo, and the Patriots always lurking around. But at some point, you have to nut up. You have to basically say, we need to improve and we need to get our guy. Because every year you do not have that guy, you are worse off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they have all the talent right now to win, and if you can get a quarterback on a rookie scale deal that you can trust, you could be competitive for the next 4 to 5 years without having to pay said quarterback. So the Jets are in a good spot. They just need to figure out, is it going to be somebody like Jimmy or Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr or Tom Brady? I'm just throwing out random names. Or, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. Like, what direction do you want to go? Because you need to pick one. You can't just stick with what you're doing.
If you're picking up Jimmy G, you are assuming that your team is basically at the point where the 49ers were a couple years back. If you're confident enough in your roster to where they will do the heavy lifting, so the Jets defense has been one of the best in football this year. In terms of just game-to-game basis, they have been incredibly consistent. They have played incredibly strong defense whenever Zach Wilson's off the field because they are constantly on the field when Wilson plays.
Yeah.
Speaking of getting the guy, Jacksonville, the vindication is real. Trevor Lawrence is the QB1 in his class, and he's going to be a top 10 guy for the next 10 years. This is what happens whenever you surround talent with talent. The Travis Etienne pick felt like a reach last year or 2 years ago, but you know what happens whenever you bring in guys that played with guys in college? They tend to produce, i.e. Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. The list goes on. This Jaguars team has the makings to be probably the front runner in the AFC South for the foreseeable future. They're not only young, they are also incredibly talented with room to grow. This is a team that currently blah, blah, blah. So the Jacksonville Jaguars have the 19th overall pick so far. And if they make the playoffs, they're going to – where's Tennessee's pick? Huh. So Tennessee Titans are at 13. Jacksonville Jaguars are currently at 19. So the Jaguars are going to have a top 20 pick. And in a class like this, there's plenty of talent to go around. There's not as much top-end guys like top 5 talents like they had last year, but Jacksonville can improve. And the thing about Jacksonville on paper is they came into this year, every year since Lawrence's rookie year, they've effectively improved over the offseason. And before it even started, they added Calvin Ridley to come off the sidelines next year. So it's like Jacksonville just keeps improving, and I expect them to do well in the draft coming out of this year. It's insane to watch. And I think the run they're going on is kind of planting Doug Peterson in that coach of the year conversation, because people didn't expect Jacksonville to even be close to like pushing for the playoffs this year. Like
Yeah.
we said they'd play spoiler, but spoiler's far different than hosting a playoff game.
Yeah. Can you imagine if they had Aiden Hutchinson instead of Trayvon Walker? I feel like they
They
missed
already
there.
I don't think they missed. I think if we're looking back at the top 5, like NFL 2022 draft results, I don't think there's a single miss. Because the thing with Walker was they weren't drafting him off of pure they weren't drafting Trayvon Walker off of pure just stuff. He was an insanely athletic. He's a genetic freak, essentially. And he allows them versatility on the line because he can play interior defensive lineman. He can play off the edge. And they already have a guy in Josh Allen who's a monster off of the edge. So I think out of the top 5, nobody missed. Like literally, Trayvon Walker, Aiden Hutchinson, Stingley, Gardner, Kayvon Thibodeau. That's probably the best top 5 we've had in a good while. Like all of them have been good this year. Like I'll look up Trayvon Walker's stats right now. And yes, he's
It's
not going to
just
win
it's
Rookie of the
crazy
Year.
that Trayvon Walker seems like probably one of the most least talked about first picks in a while.
He's
We
got
don't really hear a
45
whole lot.
tackles. He's got 45 combined tackles, 3.5 sacks, a pick, and 9 yards off of that pick. He's having a really good year, which is the crazy part. Because I look up Aiden Hutchinson's stats and we'll compare them for reference. This is the whole debate between Aaron Donald and so Hutchinson has more sacks and he has one more interception, but he has a similar amount of combined tackles. Hutchinson isn't darting off the ball and getting a bunch of tackles. He just has 4 more sacks. Like Trayvon Walker is a quiet pick because interior defensive linemen really don't get talked about in the same
No.
light as edge rushers. The opportunities just aren't there. It's the whole Nick Bosa versus Micah Parsons argument for defensive player of the year this year. It's 2 different worlds of like schools of thought. Micah has more opportunities in the secondary because he's dropping back into coverage at times. Bosa's just hammering off the edge constantly.
Mm-hmm. What about the Panthers just beating up on the Lions on Saturday? We'll talk about that. Stop the Lions' momentum real quick. Shane Zylstra, 5 catches, 26 yards, 3 touchdowns. So glad all my Amon-Ra St. Brown touchdowns came in at the right time. The Panthers, after firing their head coach, which was long overdue, Matt Rule firing was long overdue. So was Cliff Kingsbury. Trading away Christian McCaffrey, and they could host a playoff game if they win next week. I don't think the division is locked at that point if they win next week because Tampa beat Arizona somehow. But think about it. This Panthers team could host a playoff, would be hosting the Dallas Cowboys if they beat the Tampa Bay Bucks next week. With Sam Darnold.
I bet you're rooting hard for the Panthers to win that game.
It doesn't matter. We're going to lose in the first round.
Carolina's the bad good team of this season for me. On paper, their talent is pretty damn deep. This is a team that has some of the better defensive pieces in the NFC that could be open to a trade, especially this offseason, depending on what direction they want to go. We're talking about a team that features Brian Burns, Xavier Woods, Jeremy Chin, J.C. Horn, Shaq Thompson, and I can continue to go on. This is a really good defense, very talented defense full of a lot of professional football players. And that's not even talking about the weapons they have on offense. I get they subtracted Christian McCaffrey, but during games that don't matter as much, Deonta Foreman is an absolute monster on the ground. He goes from averaging half a yard per carry to 8. It makes no sense. The Panthers are the hot cold team of the season. They will come out and kick the absolute shit out of your favorite team, or they'll come out and basically play a stinker. Their best player is DJ Moore, and I think it's by a wide margin. Sam Darnold is better than Zach Wilson at this point. And it's the same idea as the Jets are having currently, just the Panthers are the worst version of it, and Darnold's a better version of Zach Wilson. You can have all the pieces, but if you don't have the person to run the offense, it's a lot harder to keep putting points up consistently. And that's the Panthers' MO this season, is consistency. And
Yeah.
so if we could, all they have to do is finish strong. Because if we look at the Panthers' schedule coming up, it's Bucks and Saints. They got 2 divisional matchups, and if they could win those 2 games, they're gonna make the playoffs. Because if I'm correct, they have the tiebreaker over the Bucks, don't they?
They do if they win.
And they
Next
already
week.
beat them once, 21-3. And after that game against Arizona on Sunday night, any faith I've continued to have in Tampa Bay, it's gone. Like, I get it. Like, Brady looked absolutely god awful, and the only reason they won that game is because Cliff Kingsbury doesn't know how to win. You know that scene from Jimmy Neutron where they're talking about the guy who never finished anything? That's Cliff Kingsbury in an NFL season. He never finishes. It is absolutely insane to me. At this point, send the entirety of the NFC South to the CFL and just bring in 4 new teams. It's the abomination of the NFL. Same with the AFC South to a certain extent. They're just lucky to have Trevor Lawrence. But man, if you love ugly football, Bucks Panthers is going to be the game of the week.
It's going to be completely wild. Who do they play? Let's see here. After that, the Panthers play the Saints.
Yes.
So
Dennis
that
Allen
means
masterclass.
Tampa must play Atlanta because I think it's always divisional games the last week of the season. So that'll be something. Like, Panthers control their own destiny. They win their next 2, they're in. It's really as simple as that for them. And yeah, like you said, any faith in Tampa Bay is just dead. They look so bad against one of the worst defenses in the league. And they suffered another injury on their O-line. Tristan Wirfs was hobbling around. They are just beaten to hell, and Brady just doesn't have the time like he used to. He's not hitting throws like he used to. Some overthrows, some underthrows. It's just there's nothing there for Tampa. And for the Lions, they're kind of they helped the Packers. The Packers got everything they needed on Saturday. Everybody in front of them lost. But I think the Lions still have a chance. I don't think the Commanders are going to stick around. They got beaten to hell by San Francisco. I honestly, the Giants might not even make it at this point, the way their schedule is. But the NFC, both wild cards are insane. It's really crazy out here how close it is and how almost everybody is in it. Like, even if the Raiders found a way to win on Saturday, they would have been in it. The Steelers are still technically in it. To be fair, though, the only thing that matters for the Steelers is finishing above 500 or at 500. They can finish 8-1.
Yeah, it's it's absolute insanity. I have little faith in any team outside of my Chargers coming out of any wild card spot this year in the playoffs. It feels like both conferences have 3 to 4 teams that are absolutely hitting their strides at the perfect times and playing consistently good football. And the wild cards are just a bunch of teams that have a will that went out, or like the league this year feels incredibly top heavy. I think after your top 8 teams, you're just looking at teams that are trying their best not to screw themselves out of a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Because as good as Miami has looked throughout this season, they are in a tailspin that I don't think they're going to pull themselves out of. The Patriots have looked start-stop. Like, it's crazy. The Giants came out of the gate insanely hot, and they can't buy a win at this point. The Titans just lost the Texans. Like, it's insanity.
It's 5 in a row for Tennessee. And Malik Willis, boy, does he look bad. A 3rd-round pick for Tennessee and hasn't really looked good at all. Like,
Has not had a game of 100 passing yards yet. It's cool they let him throw it more than 20 times, but
didn't work. Derrick Henry didn't have his insane game like he usually does against Houston to carry them. Like, Houston played Dallas and Kansas City super hard. It seemed inevitable that they were going to win at some point. They were going to beat somebody because they were playing some of the top teams so freaking hard. And it happened to be Tennessee, who's on a downspin and is probably just going to let Jacksonville walk right by them at this point. Credit to Jacksonville.
this is the game that the Titans had to win if they wanted to control their own destiny. Obviously, they have to beat Jacksonville this coming week, but this was the precursor. It's like you have to beat you have to win these games. You know how the Chargers missed the playoffs last year? They lost at Houston same weekend last year. It's the 1 year anniversary of the Chargers blowing a game to Houston, and we literally missed the playoffs by 1 game. You have to win these games. Houston shouldn't have won this game. They're putting themselves in a really dangerous position with the draft coming up. You don't want to lose the first pick in the last couple of weeks of the season. Just ask the New York Jets. It's not what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean they'd be sitting at Trevor Lawrence right now, and they beat the Rams. That's all that happened.
Yeah.
Things that preceded unfortunate events. Unfortunate events. Are we over the Geno train? 25 for 40, 215, a touchdown, a pick. He had a really good running lane to keep a drive going, and he said he tried to hit Marquise Goodwin on a dive. It just, I'm not going to say Geno is like going back to what he was, but at some point, this hype train was going to slow down. Have we hit that point with Geno?
No.
Do you think Seattle
No.
retains him?
Yeah, of course. I think if Seattle wants to be competitive in the NFC West, they should re-sign Geno to a team-friendly 2-year type to like 3-year level contract. They could still take a quarterback in the first round. I love taking quarterback early, but they don't have to start him. They could have an open competition. Geno is a vet. Geno has played behind very good quarterbacks. Geno has been around the block. Geno knows what it takes to be an NFL quarterback, and that's important for anyone that's coming into the league. Because a guy like Zach Wilson inherited one of the most dysfunctional quarterbacking franchises since I don't know when. Their only claim to fame as a quarterback is Joe Namath, and he's a Hall of Famer, sure, but if you look at the stats, you'll scratch your head. Geno's fine. It's fun to kick a guy when he's down. His best weapon went out for the season, and Marquise Goodwin was only good for about 2 snaps this game. He was playing with DK Metcalf and a bag of coal this game. His second leading receiver was Colby Patterson. That speaks for itself. Like Laquan Treadwell was third on the team in receptions for this game. DJ Dallas was second to DK Metcalf. The Chiefs defense is not a world beater, but the Chiefs defense is better than league average. They're always overachieving against lesser opponents. And it's hard enough to keep pace with the Kansas City Chiefs, let alone whenever you're missing your best target on the outside. Geno looked bad, sure. I'm not going to say that he looked perfect, but outside of fantasy purposes, because the thing is, the Geno Smith thing is he's been great for fantasy football, and he's been good for regular football. They're 7-8. This was a team that I was projecting to win 3 games this year.
Yeah.
Nobody had the Seahawks pushing for a wild card spot. I had them hopefully getting a top 3 pick by their own volition, not by the Denver Broncos. Anything they are doing now is officially gravy. And if they make the playoffs, Geno has to be the starter next year. And in an offseason where the best guys available currently are going to be Jimmy Garoppolo, and you name the rest because they're all under contract and they could be cut or they could be traded, I'd roll the dice with a guy like Geno Smith. Because is he better than the top 10 guys in the league? No shot. But is he worse than the other 15 behind them? I don't think so. If you love Kirk Cousins and if you employ a guy like Dak Prescott, not saying Dak is worse than Geno Smith, but for the cost, Geno isn't that bad. Because he's not going to get an 8-year, $240 million contract. This guy might get a 3 to 4 year deal for what? $85 million? Like, I don't know what the salary range is going to be because we don't really have these kind of contracts in the NFL. But let me see. Geno Smith extension. I think it would be really short-sighted for this organization to not extend him. They want Geno Smith extension. We'll start negotiating. Talks like this following the season. Yeah, I don't know what the number would look like, but I don't think they'd sign him for more than 4 years. Like, he's currently 32. Correct. He's 32 years old.
And the thing is, too, is they could fall to probably, I don't know, 6, maybe.
They could. Good. Sorry.
I'm in a weird spot where I'm like looking at the order and see where it could get shifted around. Like Arizona's not taking a quarterback. The Colts might. The Falcons probably can't, even though I feel like they should, but I don't know how to feel about the Falcons. So like they could fall behind. They could fall behind Chicago. Chicago's not a problem. They're not taking a quarterback. Arizona's not taking a quarterback. The Colts might, the Falcons might, the Lions might. So you kind of want to sit in your probably between 3, 4, and 5 range if you want a quarterback, if you're still looking at Will Levis. Because right now this has a mock of Will Levis falling to Carolina at 8, which makes sense to me. I don't think Detroit takes Will Levis, but I think Detroit takes CJ Stroud if it fell to him. So I don't know. Like they should sign Geno, like you said, to a team friendly deal. I think that would make the most sense. And I think Drew Lock is a free agent anyways. So having a guy like CJ Stroud or Will Levis sit behind Geno and kind of be the backup is probably not the worst thing in the world. I mean, like you said, everything is gravy for them because Denver has been absolutely atrocious. And let's see where this has them. This has them taking. Do they not have? They have. They're taking a quarterback at 12, so that's fine.
That's the
Take a
thing.
cornerback.
They have flexibility coming into the draft under current circumstances. They have the 3rd pick and the 12th pick. They could trade out of the 3rd pick and coop more assets. If Bryce Young falls, you could take a Bryce Young and then get defensive help elsewhere at pick 12. Like they have an insane amount of flexibility. And if they're in on a guy like Anthony Richardson, they could take the 12th pick and trade back. That the possibilities that the Seahawks have this offseason are similar to what I thought they would be having based upon them being terrible. So, because I was expecting Denver to miss the playoffs, be in the wild card hunt, and Seattle being one of those like 3 to 4 win teams fighting for their lives, trying to get a top 5 pick. And I was correct in how the picks were going to lay out. It's just the seedings and the finishes of the respective teams were completely off.
Yeah.
So if Denver can't get a CJ Stroud, or if Seattle can't get CJ or Bryce, totally punt on it. I have no problems with them not taking quarterback in the top 3. But if you can get the guy, I know Bryce Young had a down year at Alabama this year due to some injuries, but he's a pretty damn good prospect. And the thing about the Seahawks is if this year is not a fluke, I don't know when we're going to see them have the opportunity to get a top 2 quarterback prospect in the draft. Because in a perfect world, you'd love to suck next year and get Caleb Williams. He's probably the best quarterback prospect we've seen in years. Just based upon the tape, the stats, you name it, he's got it. But Caleb Williams still has a year until he can declare for the draft. Same with the guy in Drake May. But this class feels like a 2-headed monster, and everybody else is kind of like darts on a chalkboard. Levi's has a higher upside than the other guys, but this is different than last year's class with Pickett, Willis. I don't think there was really any NFL guys in the first round for that class, and Pickett going in the first round made sense because it's Pittsburgh. But I was not impressed with any of the quarterbacks coming out last year. And due to the outcomes, I don't think anybody should be impressed with the quarterback class from 2022. But 23 is a step up, especially on that top end.
Yeah. For the Chiefs, chasing the Bills, it's as simple as that. They are not in control of their own destiny as long as Buffalo keeps winning. But Buffalo plays Cincinnati next week, so that's going to be something to think about. In a snow game, Deshaun Watson finishes 15 for 31, 135 and a pick. Really sucks to see such a great person like Deshaun Watson not do well right now. But we talked about it last week. There's going to be growing pains with Deshaun Watson, and a full offseason should be really interesting to see. So, because they have a really solid wide receiver room. I think with the addition of Mari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, I don't think David Bell is the worst wide receiver 3 in the world. I think Kareem Hunt is walking, as far as I know. My man hasn't done anything this year at all. You want to talk about a 2-headed monster? There's no monster back there anymore. Nick Chubb, 24 for 92, no touchdowns. Saints were able to squeak this one out with Andy Dalton going 8 for 15, 92, and an interception. So Alvin Kamara got 20 touches. So we're out here, but never forget death taxes, Taysom Hill, vulture touchdowns. We'd love to see it. As always, Taysom, we hate you. In a nice way. 9 carries for 56 yards and a touchdown. Somebody asked the question earlier. We got really into the New Orleans world, and they were talking about, should I dynasty stash Rashid
Shaheed.
Shaheed? There you go. And it's like, well, Alvin Kamara might get suspended. We don't know if Michael Thomas is coming back. Jarvis Landry ain't coming back. Who's quarterbacking for the New Orleans Saints next season? It's not Jameis Winston, and I don't still fully understand what's going on there. Is it Andy Dalton? It's like, what? The New Orleans Saints don't have a first round pick. Like, what? Where does this? We kind of know where the Browns are going to go. They have Nick Chubb, they have Deshaun Watson, they have a good wide receiver room, they have a good defense. They're just going to try and get it all together on the same page and push for next year. But like, what are the Saints doing? Like, they're 6-9. They'll either finish 7-10. They'll probably lose to the Eagles next week, and they might win Week 18 against the Panthers. Who knows? But like, what does this franchise do? Fires Dennis Allen, right?
You see, they would love to be one of the teams that's in the sweepstakes for Sean Payton, but you know, Sean Payton's not going to come out of retirement to go to the team that he ran into cap hell. Dennis Allen is lucky that the coaching carousel from this offseason was highlighted with names like Josh McDaniels and Nathaniel Hackett, and there were other nincompoops and jobs prior to him getting the full-time gig in New Orleans. Dennis Allen's safe for now. I wouldn't say safe in a confident manner, but it's not like he's been terrible this season. I just think they need a really good offensive coordinator, and that would fix some of the problems. Because defensively, the Saints are the Saints, and they tend to be able to put up decent showings week to week. They just lack an identity, and they lack a starting quarterback. I wish the Saints had draft capital, because if they could add a competent young starter, I think it makes their team a lot more exciting. Granted, if they could add youth anywhere, it'd make their team far more exciting. Or, you know, cheap contracts, because the problem is they have a house of cards and rent is due and the price is always going up. So Uncle Sam's going to come knocking for this team in the next 6 months, and they're going to have to make some big cuts and some big trades. Kamara's getting paid out of the ass. Michael Thomas is on a huge deal. Cameron Jordan on a big deal. They don't have the money to keep it up, and they don't have the success to keep them going. So I think this offseason or next offseason, we're going to see a Saints fire sale. I think a lot of the talent they've been fostering over the last couple of years is going to have to go. And it sucks, because this is a team that never truly realized their potential, for lack of better terms. And to be fair, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson ripped the soul from the New Orleans Saints. It sucks to say it, but that pass interference call, it's the story of this team. It's too little, it's too late, and it's just the window was closed before it ever really got to open for them. Because after that pass interference call that wasn't called, we had the Minneapolis Miracle. Well, that was the year prior. And then after that, you have the Kyle Rudolph game. And it's 1 step forward and 3 steps back, whether it be injuries, bad calls. The Saints can't get ahead of anything. And that includes their own division. So they're going to have to take a deep look in the mirror this offseason, kind of evaluate which direction Tampa's going to be going moving forward. Because if Tampa's going to regress and Brady's going to retire, the Saints have a shot here to do something that I think could be sustainable for 3 to 4 years. If they bring in a guy like Jimmy, or they're able to get a Derek Carr, I think the Saints could bridge themselves for the next 3 or 4 years. Cap hell still, but there's no sense trying to compete for a division title if you have no shot and continuing to pay luxury tax.
Yeah, I mean, you look at I looked at Michael Thomas's contract last week. We were talking about the Saints, and it's extremely backloaded. And I think that everybody's contract on the New Orleans Saints, who's been there for more than a year, is extremely backloaded. Backloaded. I don't know how long you could keep that up. I really don't. And at some point, it feels like, you know, when we get to Russell Wilson and like possibly cutting Russell Wilson, like he has $107 million dead money hit. That's over half the cap. Like Denver's playing with, you know, Walmart grocery baggers at that point, because they just can't afford to literally pay anybody. And that's where I feel like the Saints team is. It's like, you might as well just like see if you could offload some of these contracts and kind of just build from the ground back up, because like you said, they never realized their full potential with Drew Brees. They got one Super Bowl title out of him, and then after that, it was Bounty Gate, and then the Minneapolis Miracle, the non-pass interference call, Kyle Rudolph getting 2 feet in. It's just all these little things happened. Chargers muff to punt. Hate to see it. But I just don't know how to feel about the Saints. Like, Tampa Bay does regress and Tom Brady retires. They're not a good football team. They're not a good football team right now. The Atlanta Falcons are not a good football team. The Carolina Panthers are not a good football team. Somebody with 10 losses could be hosting a playoff game out of this division, and nobody really looks like they're gonna take the reins of the division next season, and the division's gonna be just as bad. So do the Saints try to backload more contracts and get a Derek Carr or a Jimmy Garoppolo to try and win the division for 2 years while everyone else sucks? Then you rebuild? Is that kind of where you feel they're at?
I don't
Does
know,
it hinge
man.
on Brady retiring though?
Yeah, it does. That's the thing. This entire division is basically put on standby until they really have. They're going to have to make decisions, and decisions are hard to make whenever it comes to being able to. It's just tough. Like, I don't know how
Yeah,
else to describe it. They're in purgatory, for lack of better terms, and in a perfect world, they would be able to, I don't know, like salvage it, but there's no salvaging what's going on for them. They're too old and they cost too much money. And until they can rectify either of those, they're not going to be able to go very far. Because the best
yeah,
teams in the league are either young or they're very flexible with the cap. See the Chiefs, they're paying Mahomes now. They're cutting back on other salaries to keep that core together. And the Saints are going to have some tough discussions with some very talented players in order to make those cuts. And it's just I don't know where it's going to come from. And that's the
yeah.
biggest thing.
Let's see. Across the league, the Bengals beat the Patriots. The Patriots tried their best to come back. Joe Burrow threw the ball 52 times, 36 in the first half when they were up 22-0. That was so odd to me, but I guess when you have the weapons that Joe Burrow does, you're just going to consistently throw it against one of the better run defenses in the league. But the Bengals are hot. They're 11-4. They play the Bills next week, and that could change a lot of things in the AFC. The Vikings are 11-0 in one-score games. They find another way. Daniel Jones threw for 334 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Talked about it earlier with Tyler, kind of the feel of what this Giants team is. And it's not, you don't have to be an expert to see that one of the biggest glaring issues for the Giants is the wide receiver room. Darius Slayton's hurt, and he, for a better term, is kind of old at this point. He was the guy for the old regime. You have Isaiah Hodgins, Richie James, Wan'Dale Robinson got hurt. I like Daniel Bellinger. I think he has some potential for sure in that offense. You have Saquon Barkley, who's obviously you have to keep. At this point, you're probably keeping Daniel Jones for another year or two and trying to draft a wide receiver, it seems like. I think that's your best guy, and maybe you go after somebody like, I don't know. We were talking about DeAndre Hopkins possibly getting moved out of Arizona. You could see maybe one of the Tampa Bay guys get moved out if Tom Brady goes. You're kind of looking across the league. That would be somebody that could help out Daniel Jones and something that could significantly improve a bare room, so to speak.
The New York Giants are going to have to pay a lot of money to Saquon Barkley in the form of the franchise tag. And they're paying Kenny Galladay a lot of money to not play football in an effective manner. So I think the Giants are going to be a favorable trade candidate. I think they're a team like what we saw with the Philadelphia Eagles and making a move for an A.J. Brown. I don't think the Giants move for a guy as young as A.J. Brown, so I don't think they're going to try and pay a guy that hasn't been paid yet, which is why I think the likes of, if Brady retires, a Chris Godwin, obviously DeAndre Hopkins, if he's going to be on the move, they are going to be in the market for one of these veteran type receivers that already has their payday. How the Raiders traded for Antonio Brown a couple of years back, how Devontae Adams got moved. I don't think they're going to be in on players that are that caliber, but just below that. I think the Giants could occupy a really nice sweet spot and without having to give up a crazy amount of capital. Like, who says a
And
second round pick and a future third doesn't get DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason? I'm sure Kyler would demand a
100%.
trade
And
after that happens, but at what point? At what point do you just sit there and go, we can't keep doing this? And that's the biggest problem.
yeah. And the thing is, too, is if they get knocked out of the playoffs, they kind of fall maybe in the top 15, maybe in the low, like top 20 of picks. And you could maybe go get a guy like Jackson Smith and Najigba. And that
Yeah.
would be something to go along with somebody you get, and you have a significantly improved room. And after that, it's really your secondary. Kayvon Thibodeau has been insane. Been an outstanding pick for that team. And Brian Dable is a freaking guru. The way he's turned this team around from 3rd and 10 quarterback sneaks with Mike Glennon. So there is really room for this Giants team to push through and kind of be in the same spot they are now, maybe even better.
Yeah, I genuinely do agree with you in the fact that Daniel Jones is not terrible. Daniel Jones has actually played pretty damn well, all things considered. Um, is he going to be the guy that's going to lead you down the field and win you games week in and week out? No, that's not who Daniel Jones is. And I don't think that's who Daniel Jones was drafted to be. This was a guy coming out of Duke. And Dr. Clutch, congratulations. Got the chip this weekend, or he's going to the championship.
Let's
So
go.
congratulations. It was Black Sunday this week because, oh my God, if you had guys that
Yeah.
were hitting in your lineup, it was few and far between.
Yeah. Out of, teams that I've seen with super studs putting up 60 points altogether, I'm glad to see that you were able to get out of that because I was not immune to that this weekend. Me and Devin, our team suffered a loss because of a stud going down, and then all my studs just went into the dirt. Out of my whole team, including my quarterback, I got 1 touchdown this weekend. Tyree got tackled at the 1. Anyways, it was a bad weekend. Definitely was not the giving season, that's for sure, in fantasy football.
Not at all.
Vikings 12-3. Justin Jefferson, Vikings franchise leading receiver in history, might break Calvin Johnson's record if he has a big 2 games. I think he's like a couple hundred yards behind him at this point, I believe. But hell, he might not even play Week 18 if they can afford it. So we'll see what happens there.
They beat the Packers. They're not going to start him.
Yeah, it's as simple as that for sure. Bills beat up the Bears. What do you want to say about it? Josh Allen, another 2 picks though. Is that? I mean, to say I was going to ask you if it concerns you, but the answer is no.
Oh, it
32
does.
touchdowns. To what extent?
He's leading the league in interceptions, isn't he?
I believe so at this point. I think he has 13.
This team is not talented enough to keep turning the ball over at the rate that they're doing it. 35-13 is great, but if you're playing a good NFL team, 2 picks is going to keep that game closer than you'd like it to be. And as the Chiefs proved to us last season, they don't. If you're going to allow the top teams in the National Football League to be within a score in the playoffs, their defense is one that is prone to bending, and it will break after extended use. There's a reason why they weren't in the Super Bowl last year, and it's because they could not stop anybody on defense. Yeah. And well, yes, holding the Bears to 13 points is great, but may I also let you know Justin Fields had 7 rushes for 11 yards. Like this Bears team was operating on fumes. It was the worst Bears performance we've seen in weeks offensively. And well, yes, Buffalo is the current 1 seed in the AFC. I have plenty more confidence in a team out in Kansas City because they've been here and they've done that. Yes, Buffalo has been leading their division for the last 2-3 years, but let's not act like we're going to crown these kids yet. They have not won a big playoff game to date. Am I wrong? They have come up short in Kansas City. They've beaten Tennessee, which is great for them. They've beaten Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. But outside of those 2 wins for Josh Allen, where is the moment? Because if he's arrived, obviously it hasn't translated to playoff football. They are a divisional out year in and year out, regardless of how good the schedule is to them. Should they make the AFC Championship this year? Probably. And I think if they lose to the Bengals this week, we'll have to see them lose in the divisional again. Because at least in Cincinnati, they have a defense that we've seen play above their weight class numerous times, especially last season. Buffalo's defense is as banged up as anybody's in terms of the competitors in the AFC. They're missing a safety. They've been missing him for a majority of this year. Von Miller is done for the year, and Tre'Davious White hasn't touched the football field since last season. Those are problems that aren't going to be solved moving forward relatively soon. So, as good as they are, Tre'Davious White actually played this week. I will swallow my words. Makes me feel a little bit better. But Josh Allen cannot continue to turn the ball over like this, because once the playoffs start, especially after the wild, because the thing is, they're not going to get one of these gimme games. They're not going to get one of these teams that are struggling to make the playoffs that eke in as a 7 seed. They're going to have to play a team that earned their way to that spot. Because if I'm Buffalo and the Chargers come out and they're playing the 1 seed after their first matchup, I'm personally scared shitless. Granted, the Chargers and their offensive coordinator have made them look very human for stretches during this season. The Chargers have weapons out of the ass. And in terms of defenses, they're playing way above their weight right now. They're missing their top corner. Derwin James just came back for a quarter of football until he earholed somebody. And Joey Bosa could be back come playoff time. So what I'm saying is Buffalo shouldn't feel too comfortable. They are a team that has been beat and will continue to be beat by inferior teams. Look at Miami earlier this year. Tua was playing with a traumatic brain injury and beat those guys. Like, I understand it's a week-to-week thing, but just penciling in Buffalo as the AFC champs is just it's asinine. It's KC's to lose until it's proven differently, and the Bengals did it last year.
Well, and to give it context, the leader in interceptions is Derek Carr at 14. Josh Allen is 13. He's tied with Matt Ryan and Davis Mills at 13.
That is concerning.
Joe Burrow has 12. But the Bengals, they're kind of in the same spot. They're kind of out shooting people for the most part. 12 is a lot for Joe Burrow, but then you get into 11 for Mahomes, 11 for Cousins, 11 for Rodgers, which is, something we're not used to at all. Then you get into Fields, Brady, Pickett, Mariota at 10 and 9. But yeah, to be tied with Matt Ryan and Davis Mills at 13 and Derek Carr, those guys' teams are fucking terrible. They're terrible. Let me tell you.
Like 13, it's leading the league in interceptions is different than being second or whatever we want to say it is. But Josh Allen has been basically crowned as the second best quarterback on the planet. And I don't think there's, I at this point, am I going to sit here and say it's just the de facto truth? I don't believe so. Personally, for me, like, Josh Allen is great and Josh Allen is incredibly talented and he's warranted of that contract that he received. But outside of Patrick Mahomes, I don't think there's a clear two in the league. You can go week to week and say who you think's better, but like, he has 32 touchdowns, which is great. I just who would you rather have over a guy like Josh Allen currently? I think that's the thought exercise that needs to happen, because I can't really name a whole lot. Joe Burrow has more passing touchdowns than a guy in Josh Allen. And granted, Josh Allen doesn't have the receiving weapons of a Joe Burrow, which is debatable because Stephon Diggs is a great receiver. Jamar Chase is great. Isaiah McKenzie, Jamison Crowder, and Gabe Davis should be enough on paper. We're not going to sit here and act like Josh Allen is talent poor on his own roster.
Yeah.
But
the thing is, too, is that, Joe Burrow definitely doesn't run as much, or Patrick Mahomes doesn't run as much as Josh Allen. So you could factor that in. I think he's only fumbled a couple times, but also at some point those hits become concerning, even regardless of Josh Allen's size.
It's Josh Allen this season has show me the fumbles. Rushing statistics, rushing and receiving. Okay, so he has 746 rushing yards, a very solid clip of 6.5 per carry. He has 7 rushing touchdowns. He's got 13 fumbles this year.
Oh.
It's both lost and recovered by their... Yeah, so it doesn't count all the fumbles lost. But on the year, he has 13 fumbles. And you pair that with 13 picks. Granted, you don't lose every fumble you give up, but He
Still,
needs you can't be turning the ball over at a high clip. That's what made Brett Favre so beatable for all those years. Like he could throw
yeah,
with anybody, but he'd give you 3 or 4 opportunities to come back and beat you. It's what made Aaron Rodgers so damn impressive over the prime of his career, and partially was the biggest fault to Rodgers because he played extremely conservative in situations. But Rodgers didn't give you the opportunity very often to beat him in big
yeah,
games. You would have to, like, Rodgers will not beat himself. But if you're going to be turning the ball over to good teams, you're going to beat yourself more often than you're going to allow them to beat you. Because the more opportunities a good offense has, the more they're going to score. And
yeah.
outside of maybe Miami without Tua or Baltimore, is there a bad offense in the AFC come playoff time? Because if Jacksonville makes it out of the AFC South, because look at the playoff. So AFC playoff. Sure. Because currently the Chargers win, they're in. Doesn't matter what seed they're going to be. They'll be 5, 6, or 7. So currently the AFC playoff picture is as follows: Bills, Chiefs, Bengals, Ravens, Jags, Chargers, Dolphins, and okay, so
And
the Ravens
everybody
are
but Houston in the hunt.
the Ravens are locked. The Ravens are locked in as a playoff team, and we don't know if Lamar's going to suit up again. So outside of Baltimore, you could finish up the season. There are 3 spots left. So the Chargers are going to be the 6th or the 7th seed. The 5 seed is locked up currently. So we've got Jacksonville, LA, and Miami. Outside of Baltimore, is there an offense that you want to face in that playoff ladder? I don't think there is.
I mean, you want to get to Tua and what happened on Sunday? Like, they do not look good.
Well, he's concussed now, too. He's in concussion protocol. So he could miss this week
That
and they could not be going to the playoffs if
that
something
too,
goes
but
wrong.
Tua turned the ball over 3 times on Sunday. Like,
All in the fourth quarter after he supposedly got concussed. The hit looked nasty. His head ricocheted off the turf.
again.
I don't know if I don't know what's up with him. Like there's a big rule of thought in basketball. Whenever you take a charge, you tuck your chin and you stiffen it. You tuck your chin, that way you don't smack your head on the court. I don't know, because whenever Tua's falling, his body's like limp. Like I get it. It
Yeah,
helps whenever you're loose, whenever you get into a big impact. But if you're allowing your head and neck to constantly snap upon impact, it's never going to be a good outcome. And
right.
credit to the Green Bay Packers defense. They did a masterful job of corralling Tyreek and Jalen, which I say, obviously, with a grain of salt. Jalen Waddle had 143 yards in the score, but against good teams, it's going to take more than Jalen Waddle and Tyreek going over 100 yards. They're going to have to keep scoring touchdowns because Tua only passed for 1 and Jeff Wilson got another. But outside of that, Sanders missed kicks. The defense, which the surprising part for me is they were playing in Miami, if I'm correct, and their defense gave up 26 points. Miami's defense at home is one of the best in football. They've proven that throughout the year. It's whenever they're on the road that they start hemorrhaging points. And Green Bay unlocked something this Sunday that we really haven't seen whenever Miami's playing at home.
Yeah, it like Jalen Waddle had a big run. Tyreek Hill had a big run. He got tackled at the 1. They gave up some big plays, but when it mattered the most, they weren't able to show up, and they went 0-4 in December. A month where the games really matter the most. This is when you got to win football games and show up. You were 8-3. Now you're 8-8. Or 8-7. Yeah, 8-7. Lost
They've
4
lost
straight. That's a
4
problem.
straight. Yeah, they are cratering. This is one of the hottest teams in football. They were literally like 8-3, atop of their division. And since they played in the snow in Buffalo, they have not been the same. And they played the hell out of that game. They gave
Yeah.
Buffalo a tough matchup. But this is a team that is relatively young. This is Tua's first full season as a starter that we're talking about here. And they're finally experiencing some growing pains that I felt were going to be inevitable. Mike McDaniel has done a great job of scheming his players open, which plays to Tua's strengths. But a big strength for Tua moving forward has to be keeping him from being on his back. He is
Yeah.
not big enough to sustainably keep getting hit in the way that he's been hit. And it's not going to get better, if I'm correct. Who was their big free agent lineman acquisition? I'm pretty sure he's out for a while now.
Oh, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Teron Armstead, or who was it? Yeah,
You know,
Teron
something
Armstead.
something interesting too, Tyler brought up earlier on his show, is that the picks that Tua threw, you watch them, they're not really going to anybody close. And something that, yeah, it's a conspiracy, obviously, but Tua does what Mike McDaniel says. And he has these plays written out as X, Y, and Z. So when you get the ball, you're going to look at X. If X is there, you throw it. If he's not, you go to Y and you throw it. Like Tua just does what he's told and doesn't improvise. And it almost kind of looks that way on Sunday. These throws are going to spots where you would think a guy would be, and they're nowhere close. But Tua just throws it anyway. He doesn't compute that, hey, nobody's close. I shouldn't throw it over there. I should do something else. It's something to think about. Like Mike McDaniel's a really good coach. Obviously, he's turned this team into, a strong contender. But if that's the case, it feels like you got a lot of work to do with Tua moving forward if you want to be a playoff contender taken seriously against the Bengals, the Bills, who are in your division, and the Chiefs.
It's tough because the problem that we're having right now with Tua is he was never the arm strength guy. He was always give him talent and he will find people. He will pass them open a little bit, but he's not going to give you the Mahomes or Herbert or even Burrow upside of having a guy taking it down the field and being able to stretch the field with the arm. Because Herbert throws a 60-yard pass, the ball's traveling 55 yards minimum. Mahomes, you can have a 70-yard reception, the ball's traveling 50-plus yards in the air. There are numerous occasions where Waddle and Hill are having to backtrack to be in the line path with the ball. Tua is not able to lead his guys into the open space. Waddle and Hill have been
multiple times on Sunday.
Excellent at finding the space and coming back to the ball. And so whenever quarterbacks don't have that arm strength, it's very hard to improvise after the play breaks down past the first 3 reads. And he's not big enough to go out there and just run the ball for 10 yards consistently without getting earholed and getting hit really hard. It's
for the Packers, they've done what everyone in front of them lost. They kind of just need to keep winning, but they got to play Minnesota next week, so that'll be interesting. Taylor Heineke got benched for Carson Wentz. Do you have anything to say about it? I have preached weeks that Taylor Heineke's not good. Taylor Heineke is not good. Same thing was last year. A little hype train, a couple of wins, even though his defense is mainly the reason why he won, and he puts together a game-winning drive when he couldn't put together a drive 6 times before that. But where do you feel with Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke at this point, or the Commanders in general?
You're owned by Dan Snyder. How much worse can it get? Like this team sucks. They're very talented at young spots. They have some bright points throughout the roster, but they lack an identity and they lack a culture. And I think that's really detrimental to whatever they're trying to build out there. They finally got back Chase Young, their second overall pick from a couple of years back, an absolute monster out of Ohio State, who's had some injury troubles out of his first couple of years. But whenever he's on, he's an absolutely electric player. They ruined RG3's career, and it's kind of like karmically they've been paid back over the last decade. The funniest part is they should have just kept Kirk Cousins, because I think if they have a guy like Kirk running this offense, they're probably fighting for NFC Division championships year in and year out with how good the defense was, especially Chase Young's rookie year. Because the thing about Kirk Cousins is he's a floor raiser of any team you put him on. Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in football, and it's not the fault of Kirk Cousins to make him not be that good. Because we've seen Stephon Diggs with Case Keenum. We've seen Terry McLaurin with a different quarterback every week some years. There are reasons behind this stuff, and that's my biggest thing currently. I wish they were worse. I wish they would have a shot at a Will Levis. I wish they would have a shot to get a guy that could actually change the direction of the franchise. They could have an actual franchise quarterback and not someone that they traded for because another franchise said, yeah, we're in too deep. This guy costs too much and he's not performing on the field. Because they're constantly going to be ushering in these quarterbacks that didn't work elsewhere. At what point are you going to expect it to work for you? It'd be one thing like the Niners where they're on their third quarterback of this season and they've already clinched their division, because the Niners are not a quarterback-driven team. They are a system-driven organization. Kyle Shanahan from the jump has told everybody, I don't need a quarterback. They traded up to number 2, the draft that featured in 2017 Patrick Mahomes. They took Solomon Thomas second overall, and they ran into the season with Brian Hoyer as quarterback. If there is a team that does not need a quarterback in this league, it is the San Francisco 49ers. Give me Jimmy G. Give me Brock Purdy. Give me Trey Lance. Hell, give me fucking Nick Mullins. Shanahan produces points. The Commanders don't have that.
And you look at it too, like Kyle Shanahan, I don't even think he wanted Trey Lance because that's not the type of offense that Kyle Shanahan runs, not with a running quarterback. Honestly, if Kyle Shanahan had his way, Mac Jones would have probably been taken. And Mac Jones would be probably doing exactly what Brock Purdy's doing right now. Mac Jones would love to be a Niner right now.
I think the craziest thing that happened in the 2021 NFL draft was the fact that Justin Fields fell so damn far. I don't understand it. He was a consensus top 2 like prospect in terms of the quarterback position for basically his entire career at Ohio State. But then everyone's like, well, Trey Lance has the perfect body, and Zach Wilson, look at how he can throw on the run and all this stupid stuff that doesn't equate to winning football games. Because if you threw Justin Fields in the Niners today, I think he's Jalen Hurts light, even more so than he is right now, because you're giving him Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, one of the best offensive lines in football, and a coach that knows how to scheme players. Like, obviously Brock Purdy is performing, but I would like to assume that a good chunk of that is thanks to the system that Shanahan has in place. And that's not a slight to Brock Purdy or anybody operating that offense, but certain weeks it feels like you could go out there and take 55 snaps and hand the ball off 55 times. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
you could throw 20 passes and the defense could carry you to a victory. Brock Purdy threw the ball 22 times and they won by 17 points. This offense is incredibly efficient regardless of who's out there.
Yep. Now, what happens, and maybe we can get into this another time, what happens if Brock Purdy takes him to a Super Bowl?
It's an open competition.
Between him and Lance, though, right? Jimmy's gone.
Jimmy's gone.
Right?
Jimmy's gone. There's no way Jimmy comes back. He's going to cost too much, and I don't think there's any upside to bringing a Jimmy Garoppolo back. If you win the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy, it's an open competition leaning towards Purdy to win out, but you can't not let Trey Lance have a shot. He got hurt. You can't fault Trey Lance for breaking his leg. Shit happens. Like the Jameis Winston stuff this year that sucks because he got hurt and he hasn't gotten the opportunity since. So the Niners are playing with house money. Everybody that they need to have under contract is under contract, and they still have draft picks. They still have one of the best minds at head coach. D'Amico Ryans hopefully stays with them for a couple more years because he would be a great head coaching candidate, the way he commandeers that Niners defense. Like the San Francisco 49ers, regardless of how many Super Bowls they won in the last 30 years, they are a NFL factory. If you're looking for great defense, Niners. If you're looking for efficient offense, the Niners. It's as set it and forget it as you could think of in the current state of the NFL. There is no variance, really. The only time we've seen them be extraordinarily bad is whenever they are hurt, i.e., the year after they traded for Jimmy, i.e., the year everybody got hurt. Bosa went down, Jimmy went down. It was 2020, if I'm correct. That was the year that they were able to be bad enough to draft a guy. In who did they get? What year was Nick Bosa? That's the question.
2019, I think.
So yeah. But that's the thing. It's like the Niners, and the thing is, the Niners don't really waste picks. Whenever they're high enough in the draft, they tend to hit. Like Solomon Thomas was the biggest miss they've had, but they've brought in guys like DeForest Buckner. They replaced DeForest with Eric Armstead. Javon Kinlaw's been a hit.
Yeah.
They have not really. They are just great at what they do. Regardless of how it finishes out yearly, they are always in the mix. So give him Purdy, give him Jimmy, give him. I'm convinced that he could run the offense with Zach Wilson, for lack of better terms. Would it be as efficient?
Mm.
Probably not.
Mm.
But if you like Mike McDaniel's offense in Miami, just watch a 49ers football game. The concepts are eerily similar. They run people in motion and they get people into space. You just have to hit spots as the quarterback. You're not throwing guys open. Guys are getting themselves open, and they're killer after the catch.
Okay, so got about 15 minutes left, and we should each talk about our teams real quick. But I'm going to go through two quick storylines
Yep.
that we'll want to get through. I'm just going to ask you a simple question. We won't jump into it too much because we'll have all off season to do it.
Yeah.
Is it feasible for the Raiders to move on from Derek Carr this season? After this season?
Yes.
Okay. Nathaniel Hackett is gone out of Denver. No surprise, they got absolutely annihilated on Nickelodeon by the Rams. Is it feasible for the Denver Broncos to cut ties with Russell Wilson? Okay.
Depends on the coach they bring in and if the ownership group wants to eat the money. His dead cap is like $100 million or something after this year. Derek Carr's
$7.
Yeah, Derek Carr's is $5 million if they cut him this season. Derek Carr, if they cut him in 2020, if they cut him this offseason, it's dead cap of $5 million. They cut him next offseason, it's $3 million. They cut him the next offseason, it's $1 million. If Derek Carr's the starting quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders next season, it's because Devontae Adams gets paid a lot of money. But Vegas, they need to reevaluate because Carr is not the guy. Not to say he never was the guy. He got hurt, and that changed the trajectory of his career. But if Carr's a Raider come next season, I'll be pleasantly surprised because I'm happy to play him in the division. But personally, if I were the Raiders, I think it's time to move on. You know who he is. If he could be Kirk Cousins moving forward, you would be ecstatic with how he has played throughout his career. But I don't think that's him. I just don't think that's him.
Because Kirk Cousins, in terms of real life and even fantasy purposes, somewhat raises the floor of everybody around him. And even if he doesn't remove it. Hawkinson, Cook, Jefferson. Like Jefferson is an outstanding wide receiver, and he can stay an outstanding wide receiver because he's Kirk Cousins. A guy like Zach Wilson, this is an extreme comparison, but a guy like Zach Wilson would turn Justin Jefferson into almost a nobody because he's so bad. Derek Carr, I think, is right below Kirk Cousins. I think he simply brings down the floor of the talent around him because he has Darren Waller, who granted has been hurt a lot of this season, but is one of the better tight ends in the league, has brought down the floor of Devontae Adams significantly. And really the only reason why they have 5-6 wins, however many they have, because Josh Jacobs has gone ballistic.
Okay, so I'm going to make a claim that you're not going to like at all, but I think it's actually pretty close. I need to look at the numbers, but I think Derek Carr is this generation's Tony Romo, for lack of better terms. He consistently has had terrible defenses throughout his entire career. And he's led teams more often than not to winning records. Like he's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 losing seasons in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year career. And counting this year. So he's basically 500 win-loss, like winning season, losing season. But he led this team before the injury to a 12-3 season. And I feel like these numbers are going to be eerily close, man. I don't mean to rag on Tony whatsoever, but they seem very similar to me. Tony Romo was a great leader.
They are similar in the sense to me is that they are, I think, quarterbacks that get a little too much flack because they're consistently playing from behind. I think Carr's stats are worse than Romo's, but Romo also got built an insanely good line at one point in his career, and that helped him significantly.
He's had better weapons throughout the course of his career.
Yes. Des Bryant, Earl Owens, Jason Witten.
Yes, Tony had better weapons, but in terms of the raw stats, they're about 3,000 to low 4s most of their years in their careers. Like Tony has a higher peak, obviously, but they are quarterbacks that play for franchises that never fully got them the defenses to help sustain the offense. Yeah. And yes, Romo's the best version of Derek Carr. But I'm not saying Tony Romo was the best quarterback on the planet ever. He was borderline top 10
Right.
for a stretch of his career, but he wasn't a top
Yeah.
5 guy, and that's fine. And that's speaking of Russell Wilson, who I don't think was ever top 5. Reason he can't be cut is because we got to wait until 2028 until his cap hit is what Derek's is going to be this offseason. It's a non-starter. Unless this new ownership group is just like, fuck it, we can eat the money. There's no way he gets cut until at least 2026, and they're still going to have to shell out $31 million.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
We'll get to Russell Wilson more as the offseason goes, especially when we find out who's going to be the head coach there, the permanent head coach. Because right now, the guy they brought in for game management, time clock management, is the head coach for the next 2 games, which would have had Jeff Saturday.
The defensive coordinator did say that he was asked and he totally declined it. I don't blame him. There's no reason for the final 2 weeks to be a scapegoat and get fired. He's going to be a leading candidate for a number of jobs. That Denver defense has been excellent for the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so 10 minutes left. I'll give you the floor for 5 minutes. Your team's up 20-3 over the Colts. They've sacked Foles 5 times. They've picked him off 3 times. Austin Eckler has 2 touchdowns. Herbert doesn't look outstanding, but he hasn't had
Stephon Gilmore is great, and that interception was an absolutely great catch off of a deflection. This Chargers team might be the scariest team coming into the AFC playoffs if this game can pan out the way it needs to, knock on wood. This Chargers team is getting healthier by the week, and that should scare a lot of the AFC's playoff teams. Do I think they have the talent to compete on the top end? Yes. Do they have the consistency? As of right now, no way in hell. I still don't like Joe Lombardi. I respect the hell out of Brandon Staley for the way that this team has persevered. I don't think there's a team that has dealt with more like adversity this season in terms of just injury luck alone. They lost their $100 million cornerback week 4. Derwin James has missed every game since like week 14, and he's going to miss this game because of an earhole tackle from the second quarter. A hot Chargers team is probably the scariest team in the NFL come playoff time. If Justin Herbert can cut down on the picks and he can get back to throwing 300 yards, 3+ touchdowns, it's going to be a very tough team to contend with. Because what happened in Cincy last year that I said was very fluky could totally happen for the Chargers. Offensively, they have more weapons than a number of teams in the AFC, and defensively, they added talent in a lot of key positions, regardless of injuries. Sebastian Joseph Day is coming on. Kyle Van Noy is having a late season surge. The secondary is playing their ass off. And if we bring back Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa is one of the best 1-2s off the edge the league's going to have come playoff time. You pair that with Rashawn Slater possibly having a shooter's chance at being involved in the playoffs. I don't expect him to be back. He tore his bicep like week 4. But if the line can stay relatively healthy and Lindsley can help command this offensive line and Herbert gets protection, the Chargers in the playoffs are scary. Granted, this team is snake bitten. We've never done anything inside the playoffs since '94. But at some point, something's got to give. They were my Super Bowl pick during the offseason for good reason. This team is incredibly talented on paper, and whenever they can actually show it on the field due to health, I think they're scarier than damn near anybody. Because defensively, they have more talent than Buffalo right now. And offensively, I think it's extremely comparable. The only thing that they have over us is Josh Allen's legs and their offensive line. KC,
because you're most likely either going to Buffalo, going to Cincy, or going to KC. Those are your 3 pretty much options in the wild card round.
And I do think the Chargers could beat any 3 of those teams. The one that I'm scared of the most is Kansas City. And the Bengals are scary as well. I'm not going to discount the Bengals. I talked a lot of shit in the offseason. They have legitimized themselves to me in a very big way. So bolt gang or don't bang, bolt the fuck up, and let's just finish these next 5 minutes because as you know from last year, the Chargers kill me inside more weeks than not. And it's actually the year anniversary of the Chargers loss to the Texans in week 14 of last year, or week 16 of last year. Another sack on the Colts. Man, I love this team. Yep.
There you go. You get 2 weeks to kind of chill out a little bit, and you're guaranteed to go to the playoffs.
Yeah, they're going to lock in their spot, and the Chargers, I want them to win out because if they can come in off of like a 5-game win streak, I don't know what teams are going to have the firepower to help slow them down.
Yeah. For me, the Cowboys beat Gardner Minshew and the Eagles 40-34. Minshew balled, man. 24 for 40. The completion percentage wasn't there, but 355, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Not a whole lot of running game for the Eagles, but without Jalen Hurts, you kind of expect that. Miles Sanders, 21 for 65. Kenneth Gainwell, 4 for 17. But here's where I have the problem from the Dallas Cowboys. 8 for 113, 2 touchdowns for Devonta Smith, 6 for 103. I'm glad we won the game. Don't get me wrong. I kind of want to lock in that we're going to be the 5 seed and we're either going to go to Tampa Bay or we're going to go to Carolina. We're going to the NFC South, whoever wins it at this point.
Yeah.
But if we're going to continue to have secondary problems, why are we even going? Granted, I would love to face Sam Darnold way more than I'd like to face Tom Brady if we have secondary problems, because I feel like we could hold down Deonta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard, because those guys were big problems for the Lions this week. They absolutely annihilated Detroit on the ground. I feel like we can't get beat on the ground as much as we used to. But for the Cowboys, the win is great, and I'm glad we didn't lose 41-40, because I didn't want to answer questions about Dak Prescott throwing for 347, 3 touchdowns and a pick, because he did have some weird decision-making towards the end there that stopped the clock, blah, 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 blah. But it feels like it would have been Dak Prescott's fault that we lost the game by 1 point, putting up 40 points. Really, CeeDee Lamb, 10 receptions, 120 and 2 touchdowns. I'm glad he's becoming that number one that we need so bad, because we sent off Amari Cooper, and God, would I feel so much better about Amari Cooper. That 3rd and 30 catch from T.Y. Hilton was sweet. I loved it. I'm glad T.Y. Hilton can produce at any capacity whatsoever, so fine by me. 1 catch for 52 yards, and it mattered. Can't complain. But Dan Quinn's got to do something. Something's got to give, or else we're just going to continue to be what we always are, a first-round exit. It's as simple as that, because we need to show up to Tampa or Carolina. We need to win, and most likely at that point, I don't believe Minnesota or San Francisco is going to lose to whoever they play. So at that point, we're going to Philadelphia. And that's going to be the game of a lifetime. One fan base is going to absolutely clown another, whoever wins that game. But right now, winning is cool, but dear God, we have a lot of problems to fix right now. And that's kind of where I'm at. You feel like you guys are on fire. You can go into the playoffs. I'm terrified to go to the playoffs right now. I feel like the complete opposite.
The problem I have with the Cowboys this season, and the thing that makes me optimistic for the Chargers, is the Chargers' demon was the fact that we haven't made the playoffs with Justin Herbert. The demon you're facing is the fact that you keep making the playoffs and you can't seem to get over the hump that is that first round, second round divisional type deal. This is the best Cowboys team in terms of being equipped to make that step. As good as the Eagles are, you guys are just as good, if not a little better at certain parts of the game. And I think in a playoff format where the Niners are as weak as they've been over the last 3 years, I'm not saying that as a knock to the Niners. They are my personal favorite in the NFC under current construction. I think the team that could have the Herculean Bengals run from this year is Minnesota. But I think if people are picking the Eagles to represent the NFC, the Cowboys should be number 2 in the rank, because the Cowboys are just the Eagles with a bit more playoff experience and a little less depth, genuinely.
Mm-hmm.
I think because at some point, Dak Prescott is going to have to take a step in the playoffs. He hasn't been bad, for lack of better terms, but if I were a Cowboys fan, this win against the Eagles, regardless of who was starting at quarterback, means something. You guys were able to kind of not slay a demon, but Minshew had a good performance. And to say that Jalen Hurts wouldn't have had a worse performance, it's all hearsay at that point. As a Cowboys fan, I think you should look forward to that wild card match, because I think if you guys could go out and dominate somebody in that 5-4 matchup, go ahead and do it. Because I think you guys with the head of steam in the NFC, outside of San Francisco, could be the favorite to take it all in terms of the NFC. I have problems with you against some of the AFC's elite, but in terms of the NFC, it's Niners, Eagles, Cowboys. And then Minnesota could just go on a run, because I don't think Minnesota's defense is comparable to those other 3 top options.
Yeah. All righty. I think that'll do it for us. Given Christmas weekend, we weren't as prepared as we usually are, but we'll come back next week. We'll see if you got some fantasy titles. Do you have any finals going?
Not this week, but I've got I'm going to be playing for a final next week in my dad's 3 quarterback league. I'm going to be playing for a
Oh yeah.
championship. I have a couple semifinals coming up as well in other leagues. I'm playing for a championship with my buddy Derek's just for fun league that we have. It's like a $5 buy-in for like 6 teams. There's no PPR. It's an absolute fucking slugfest. It's a weird league with weird scoring. I've won once, got second the next year, and now I'll probably get second this year because the other dude has an absolute fucking treasure trove of players. But I'm playing third place in a lot of leagues this year, or just consolation.
Yeah, my fantasy season's over, sadly. Oh well. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Hit the notification bell, and we are here every Monday night. We will be here Sunday morning. There's no Saturday games. There's no Saturday games this week, is there?
Games, no.
Saturday games. Okay, that's
There's a
what I
Thursday
thought.
night and a bunch of Sundays and a Monday.
Okay, so a usual week. Okay, so we'll be back Sunday morning, just about an hour before kickoff for start sits to get you those finals championships. So make sure you lock yourself up to get notified when that pops up. Answer any questions you may have, and we can all celebrate together. So I can live vicariously through you winning a championship because you took my advice. Remember, fans, huh?
I was going to say, remember, start the players that score more points. It's that simple.
Start the players that score the most points, and fantasy football is a skill game where the better player always wins. Devin?
That's it from me. Everybody, I hope you had a happy and safe holiday. We look forward to hearing from you and seeing you over the next week or so. But until then, I'm going to start porting over to Spotify because 1 week down, a couple more to go. Off-season content, look forward to it. We're going to actually start working on some dynasty rankings, which we haven't done before. So you can experience the growing pains of evaluating talent.
Jameis Winston, quarterback 1.
I'm going to tell you why Marcus Mariota is a QB1 in Dynasty. Heisman. But yeah, from me and Austin, thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll catch y'all later. And as always, peace.